to put information when and where people need it. And that's real people around the world. So while we're founded in libraries, we think about how do we continue to grow that footprint and make the right information available. And I'd say the skills of what you know and what you can do, getting that information in your hands and empowering you with that is right along that mission. So EBSCO Ed and Natural Evolution from our library services businesses.
Outstanding. I'm curious, let me start with the stacks. Like, what was the aha moment for you where you said, like, I see a problem here, here's an opportunity, like we should work on trying to solve this? I'm curious your thoughts.
You are listening to the Global CTE podcast with your host, Sylvester Chisom.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Global CTE podcast. I am your host, Sylvester Chisom. This is the place where we like to wrap a blanket of goodwill around our career and tech education community. And we interview the best, the brightest, the innovators, the movers, the shakers, the people who are really making a difference and a deep impact on education. Today is no different. I have my friend Kristin Delwo here. Now, let me tell you about Kristin. Kristin is the president and founder of Stacks and EBSCO Ed. She's also executive vice president of EBSCO Information Services and the technology lead on the Alabama Talent Triad initiative that is drawing massive attention across the nation as the most advanced skills-based talent marketplace. Kristin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, my pleasure. This is really an exciting moment. I was looking forward to this conversation to really talk about the technology part behind the education. We can get so caught up in like the curriculum and those things, but understanding in this world that we live in today, how the role that technology plays in that education space. And you're a true rock star, so I'm excited to talk to you about it. But before we get into that, what's the origin story? How do you get here?
Oh, sure. Well, I founded a library platform company, a library technology, Stacks, founded in 2016 and sold it to EBSCO in 2019. And that's when I joined the EBSCO family. And, our mission to put information when and where people need it. And that's real people around the world. So while we're founded in libraries, we think about how do we continue to grow that footprint and make the right information available. And I'd say the skills of what you know and what you can do, getting that information in your hands and empowering you with that is right along that mission. So EBSCO Ed and Natural Evolution from our library services businesses.
Outstanding. I'm curious, let me start with the stacks. Like, what was the aha moment for you where you said, like, I see a problem here, here's an opportunity, like we should work on trying to solve this? I'm curious your thoughts.
Sure. So I was a system administrator back in those days for a very large library consortia. And we had a ton of resources that folks just weren't using. Folks couldn't get to them. And these were back in the days where we were really just starting to automate library processes and procedures. And libraries didn't have quality websites. If they did, they were poor. And we still struggle with that in library business today. Do they have as professional a website as an e-commerce solution? It's a struggle for them and for a lot of reasons. But I was tasked to find ways to get folks access to these resources. And our libraries were largely rural, big geographic span, librarians of varying technical abilities, but I had 150 libraries that needed a website, and they needed to be quality. They needed to represent what we, provided to them collectively through the consortium, but also what they did locally with their local collections. And so we embarked on building a solution, and my then vendor is now my co-founder in both companies. So you can see how that starts to come together. But we did that solution for my library system, and it only took a couple of years of bringing in all kinds of other libraries into the fold of understanding how to do something like this at scale. How do you leverage SaaS, right? The right combination of subscription and customization in a way that a library could budget for it. So it wasn't very long before we decided we need to turn this into something that is budgetable and sustainable for libraries. How do they leverage technology to make these resources equitably available? I mean, we consider libraries a great equalizer, right? Knowledge is power.
Right.
So how do we empower them so they can budget for it? They know what it's going to cost, that it knows what tools and other resources they use so these things can interoperate. And how do you make that plug and play in a way that makes sense for a library? So we turned it into a SaaS product in 2016, partnered with EBSCO to take it to market. I mean, they have library customers around the world, service all the types of libraries. So partnered with them to go to market. And then in 2019, we joined the EBSCO family and started to think about how else do we think about what information folks need? Where do they need it? How do they get at it? And in today's day and age, that really comes down to my personal information. How do I get my hands on my information? How do I get to it? How do I leverage it? And how do I control that myself? So going from now, the library servicing the individual to reaching out to that individual directly.
Wow. That's quite the story there. I love that it is so deeply rooted in empathy in terms of the problem. Like, how do we get more resources in the hands? How do we make it easy to access? I really appreciate that. I want to go back to something you said.
Sure.
How did you think about that partnership to say, well, who can help us to get this in the hands of more libraries? Like, can you go back to that moment, like when you all were thinking about that?
Well, I mean, I was working in the library space, so EBSCO a significant vendor, and I think back in those days we may have been their largest customer, so strong relationship there. But I'll tell you the library resources that fascinated me the most when I first started running a public library, and the lack of reach or awareness that these things are available to you in your community, were things like small engine repair, wiring schematics for things you have around your house, for your vehicle. Did you know that you can borrow a Chilton's manual, that $500 Bible-sized book that the mechanic has, that you can't buy on the shelf in a big box store, that's available through your library? Like, these are things real people that may not be pleasure readers or think about going to the library, that they don't realize their community has this to offer them and how much it would help them in their day-to-day life. So those were the resources that inspired me the most. I mean, the keeners and you know, the information nerds like myself, we know where to find that stuff. But there are a lot of folks who don't leverage those opportunities, and that's such a waste. And so EBSCO provided a lot of those resources to us, and we're one of the first systems or technologies that we wanted to make sure we could interoperate with to make sure that those resources had that reach. So they were definitely at the top of the list. And EBSCO's just a wholesome family-owned company who shares some mission and the desire to do good, and the appreciation that knowledge is power, and really wants to do something about that. So that was a draw to partner with them and see all of the great content that they make available have a broader reach. I mean, as far as content vendors go, they have the broadest spectrum of resources.
That, sounds like a wonderful partnership there. It makes a lot of sense. And I like how you just said that there's so many resources that people don't know are available. Like you said, this $500 book that you can reserve from your library, and that's so deeply connected to like our career tech education community. Talk to me more about like the work you're doing now with EBSCO Ed and your learner empowerment and data control, because it kind of connects to that.
Yeah, I think, most of the solutions that are out there now are pretty fragmented. I've got credentials coming in a particular technology platform, and maybe some of the programming I'm taking supports those technologies, but it's pretty all over the place. And it's really hard to get my formal education captured in a digital way. How do I receive that in a way that I can, work with it the same way I can an open badge I got from a course I took online? And I mean, everybody's taking courses online now. I mean, the rate technology is moving and impacting the workforce in every role, every industry. I mean, we've got learners that didn't think they were going to have to learn again for decades. They thought they were done, and they're not done, because the world is moving very quickly. And so now we've got all these nimble education artifacts. But what about the real meaty stuff? And how do I start that? And as a young person, they have big expectations on how they will be able to facilitate that data. And, the last thing we want to see happen is that the formal education gets forgotten. Our traditional education models get forgotten because we can't read them digitally the way we read everything else. So we've been real focused on verified learning and employment records from what I call the big four. So you got your high schools, your colleges, your adult education. I'm coming back because I got to catch up for whatever reason that might be. That might just be upskilling and upward mobility and hanging on by a thread because the young one's coming into all kinds of things I don't know. And your apprenticeships. That formal education doesn't come in the form of a digital badge like the course I just took this morning, So how do we get those as equity players and be able to really understand and come out of those experiences with the power of knowing what I know and can do now, the confidence to communicate those things. I mean, all kinds of folks in this world think they don't have any skills. And let me tell you, everybody's got some, and everybody's learned some things. So I'm pretty driven to focus on making all learning count, whether that's incremental. You think you have no skills, but you took 3 welding courses in high school and you took a partial completion in a college. Well, maybe you didn't finish, but you learned 2 of the skills that you didn't get out of that high school programming. And you did some summer work there. Remember that when you were on that farm? So you got some things, some things. Now that person may not realize that they know those things. So if we can make that count, make it digitally readable so it participates in that footprint about me as an individual. And then how do I control it? For the individual learner, earner, data sovereignty, sovereign data control, really important. So while these formal education providers are now able to digitize with our technology, that learning information, and present it in equitable format to the micro learning that I'm doing in other places. So now I've got like a 1-to-1 scale. It's not a whole degree. It's broken down into pieces that can be compared, We need to get that in the hands of the individual and empower them to decide what they want to do with it. I mean, maybe I earned a skill in public speaking, but I don't ever want to do that in my life. Okay. That's real. I don't want to share that data. I want to know about that. I want to recognize that about my skill set and what I know and can do. But I want to have control on whether the internet sees that information about me, whether other people in the system that I'm using see that about me. I want to decide how I curate. I mean, we're all growing and changing and evolving and becoming new and bigger and better things every day. And maybe I don't want to talk about what I did yesterday. Maybe I've had experiences that those I learned from, but we don't need to advertise those because that's not who I am today. This is what I'm selling, right? And if we want to be real, we're selling our skills. We're out there in this marketplace, this labor force, and we need to have the power to curate that. So our tools are focused on giving the learner that power. So, there's some data that the state and our stakeholders get to benefit from in a very de-identified aggregate way that I think I'm pretty excited about. But the real power is in the hands of the learner and their individual data profile.
Yeah, I like how you broke that down, especially in those 4 buckets with the big 4. When you think about the high school component of that, how do you think we best track those skills, like you're saying, maybe from a class or from the summer job? What are you seeing, or what are you thinking in that way?
Well, in Alabama, we're fortunate to be working with the school districts and the high schools specifically, and they just instituted some new legislation that requires graduates to have a career readiness indicator. And most times that career readiness indicator, unless you're on a very heavy academic track, that readiness indicator looks like career and tech education. Well, those are very competency-based, skills-driven programming, and it's like, it's a cluster of those things that get you that readiness indicator. But we're seeing that trend across the country. I mean, recognizing that you need these skills today in order to be successful in, more than half of jobs. If we look statistically, I think it says over 50%. I would argue pretty hard to find a job that you don't need some, technical skills of some kind in today's day and age. So I think high schools are ready for a solution. We're excited to bring it to the table, working closely with our student information systems partners. So, the big players in those spaces to create sustainable, interoperable solutions that these systems don't need to worry about maintaining and don't have to worry about the data governance, right? Our system handles, here is your data sovereign experience where you must self-identify and collect your own information, and then you manage it yourself. So it takes some of that burden off the schools and makes this realistic, right? What does it need to look like operationally for them to be able to action what's going on? And they've been, what's the word? Ready and able, eager to have some solutions on how to capture that learning. So they're doing it. We're giving them some digital solutions to capture that and make sure that it sees its way through. But already I can tell you in Alabama that we are recognizing prior learning in a much more clear way than we ever have before. So, schools now are doing credit for prior learning. The problem is it comes after the admissions process, So I might think I need a 2-year program, right? Okay, I need a 2-year degree to get where I want to go. And I think the tuition is X, and I think my time commitment is Y. And then I pay my admissions, my application fee, whatever that might be. I go through the process. And then it's after that the intake will look at my education history and say, you know what, you've got some equivalency here and here and here. We can take some of this off. We can give you dual credit for prior learning for some of these things, right? So now that happens right today after the fact. Well, how many people didn't even apply because the barrier was too high? Maybe I could give you 12 months. I can't give you 24. I don't have 24 to give, but I could do 12. I could make that work. Or, I don't realize how close I am to the skills that I need for a particular goal. I had no idea. I thought I had to start from scratch. And so if we can remove some of those barriers just by making that high school stuff visible and open, I think you create new opportunities to open doors and to finish things and make people believe they could finish. You feel totally defeated if you didn't finish this cycle in high school and you didn't finish this part of college, but if you knew it still counted, if that incremental stuff counted, I think you start to really create an opportunity to impact our labor force participation rate. I mean, we have so many more jobs in America than we have bodies to fill them. And I'm saying this as a large employer. It's tough. I mean, there are so many jobs right now and not enough folks to go around. And if we could get folks moving along and having the confidence and the knowledge and the ability, the vocabulary to communicate what they could do, we could move things along quicker. We could be more efficient. So I think there's a ton of amazing stuff going on in high schools today. I mean, my kids are in their 20s, and I remember, we had like a shop class and a home ec class, and they were very focused, and that was it, and today the programming that's happening is so outstanding. And in some cases, you're getting these third-party digital artifacts from those high school courses, but there's an opportunity for high schools to verify those individuals. Because I, as an employer, can go check that, Tom Jones was issued certificate number, whatever, for this course. But I don't know if his brother took that, if a robot took that. I don't know how that credit came to be. But when the school verifies that this individual student, who I know was in my program, took this third-party course and was awarded that certificate, now an employer doesn't have to question how real that is. There's a lot of overlap in third-party sources. And we're able to visualize that now.
Okay, when you're saying, like, can you give me an example of the third-party source? Are you saying like a summer school class or something, like, and then the high school would verify it? Like, what do you, or?
Yeah, so sometimes it's like that for sure.
Okay.
Or maybe it is a certificate from the American Welding Society or a safety institute. Like, we're leveraging that stuff in all levels of education, those industry certifications at scale, right? Whether most industries have some sort of certifications that are managed by those national associations, right? Like, there are entities that are providing this curriculum, and we're leveraging that in all levels of education, starting in middle school all the way up through adult learning. Even in your hybrid apprenticeships, we're leveraging some of these third-party association type curriculum pieces, and they'll give you an open badge.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you that part. So, there's a program. I'm curious how you would think about this. In terms of the credentialing part of it. So there's a program I helped start in St. Louis, Missouri, called the Show Me the World Project. So actually coffee, right? So we use coffee as a teaching tool for educational outcomes. So the kids run basically a coffee business inside of the program. They learn the branding, marketing, coffee roasting, communication skills, selling at farmers markets. In the grocery stores, they're doing pop-up tasting events and that sort of thing. And then we take them to, these are all students from like under-resourced communities. So like we take them to places like Costa Rica where they get to see the farm to cup process. So they get a chance to visit like working coffee farms. So they're learning all these like durable skills, workforce readiness skills. And we're tracking like the durable skills of communication, collaboration, teamwork, that kind of stuff that workforce is looking for. But I have this idea. I'm like, we should be badging that stuff, right?
Yes.
And is that like, how would you approach that? I'm curious.
Absolutely. Well, so we do verified learning and employment records where you as the education and training provider could be contributing that learning data to be verified in our system. So we could, if you had opportunities or those individuals were somewhere we had technology, that's how we would look at that, is you could be that verified education and training provider, providing that individual learner data. Certainly we'd want skills-based credentials inside the credential registry. So you're part of that learning discovery repository, right? Now this learning is available to be discovered or recommended. And all of our credentials have skills on them. That is so important to be making sure you're, really defining these credentials with those skills. But we also do that self-attested. So I got my CPR with Red Cross, or I took this program with you, and I want to bring that open badge into my digital learner wallet. Well, we do that. And so if I were you can go, I could actually send you a link to go create an open badge, and you can create many open badges for free online from a CSV of learners. So you could actually go online for free as an education training provider and create and issue open digital badges with the skills attached for your program. You could do that today and no charge to you, loading a CSV of learner data. Those learners can then self-register for an open badge wallet and collect those assets. They can bring those assets into the EBSCOED Digital Learner Wallet to use alongside those verified learning and employment records from our Big Four and all of our other special partners, which might be a program like yourself. We certainly have some of those on the go where it's a little more, internship, co-op style programming. Certainly, we should be credentialing, making all of these things count and really giving them solid skills definitions. But today, without barrier to entry, you could be issuing open digital badges that those students are free to take with them and take into any solution, such as ours, that they choose to include it. So that could happen between you and the learner today and use it in systems like mine. However, I would lean on trying to verify that, because an employer can look at it quite differently if you, the ed training provider, is verifying that individual. That's a little different for you to process and evaluate than these self-attested open badges that really, as easy as I just told you, you could badge it, you could make fake for fake programs. So employers feel the need to go and find out the validity of the program, right? I may only be able to put in a last name and a certificate number and digitally say, yeah, you did. Is that the right guy? I hope so. But when you as the training provider verify that, and we can get to that verified learning and employment record place beyond the Big Four. I mean, the Big Four is so powerful. I mean, I'm so excited. But I think all of these pieces have potential to feed systems like this. And, that's the mission, is to make it attainable and usable for all of these players, big and small. And I mean, honestly, the small program player probably has more technical wherewithal and capacity to move with these kinds of innovative solutions. And the big players, it's a little tougher for them to think at scale. How do you?
So, Kristin, this is I feel like this is like part 3 of a conversation I've had on the podcast with Noah. Do you know Noah in Colorado, the Badge Summit?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I had him on. We were talking about, like what you're saying, everything, the digital credential could touch everything from the self badging to like something that's more clear, like the Big Four, to an extracurricular thing. And then the work that Sean Murphy was telling me about, like what they're doing with Walmart Academy, and then also just pushing in even the triad, which I want to talk to you more about. But I'm curious. I want to stay on the verifiable part for a little bit.
Yeah.
What are the parameters or qualifiers that you feel stand up to say this is a good source to verify something? Because I feel like there is so much learning that's happening outside of the classroom that we don't, like you said, we don't recognize, whether it is an outstanding extracurricular program, an after school program, or even someone's first job at Chick-fil-A or something, and it's like you learned all these skills, but then how do you think about the verifiable part?
Sure. Well, I mean, in this space, verifiable or verified is a very loaded term, suitcase word, we call it. It can mean all the things. There's digitally verified. This is what I'm talking about, that certificate number and a last name, but who really took that course? Nobody knows how that badge came to be or who took that course. So there's digitally verifiable that has some reach to say that there is a digital asset, but anybody can create these digital assets. So in today's world, for me, that's a tough one to say. That's still, in our system, self-attested. It can be digitally verified. So you self-attest you got your CPR certificate from Red Cross. I type in the certificate number you gave me and your last name in our system, when the system does it, and it can say, you can click verify, and it can go out and say, yes, I verify that certificate exists. Didn't verify an individual yet. So what we're introducing with our technology is verified, not verifiable, but verified learning and employment records, where we're talking to the system of truth and we're talking with these vendors. Now, there are some big solutions out there that are doing one-to-one verification, leveraging some blockchain. As cool as I think that is, as a big employer, I have no idea how EBSCO would verify one-to-one on demand requests to say they took this course as part of their employment here. I mean, we've got folks in earning credentials every day. Lots of folks earning credentials as part of their job training every day. So who would take these calls? Who would verify one at a time? Like, one at a time, to me, doesn't scale the way we want. So that's where these interoperability with the Big Four come into play. And how do we at scale create movement and momentum? And so that's what we're doing now with the education and major training providers and special programs. I think we have a ways to go to get employers comfortable with that kind of sharing. I think right now they're happy to share when it's in their interest. So if it only informed recommended candidates for their jobs, or it only, but we're all scared that we're going to lose the talent we work so hard to acquire. And I definitely have some empathy to that. So I think we're a ways away before employers want to share verified learning and employment records with systems of record like this. But I think we're on the right track to opening that up and removing the sensitivity around that. I think once the data's out and folks are empowered, well, now we just have to move in a new way. And, I think this resistance or hesitance, I think we'll get over the hump if we can get the major providers working towards verified data at scale.
Wow, this is I'm enjoying this conversation so much. It's like you have so much knowledge on this in this domain of expertise right here. Let's keep the party going and take it to Alabama.
Sure.
The talent triad, the most advanced skills-based talent marketplace. Talk to me about your role in that work.
Oh, it's been a labor of love, I suppose you could say. And really where a lot of this ideation has really been able to take shape. I mean, they've been such willing partners. Collectively as a state, they have a clear mission and a vision of what they want to accomplish and where they want to go. And so they've been just wonderful, willing partners to really help us unpack what is missing. What are we missing in the system to do this at scale, and to empower all of these learners to really know what they know and can do? And so that's where a lot of this innovation has taken place. And I'm so excited to see them go full production scale in the fall. I mean, we're working with 20,000 pilot learners right now, which in itself is an impactful number. You're going to reach folks and you're going to, make things possible that weren't possible before. But come fall, we'll see learning and employment records released at scale. And that means all of your high school students, all of your college students, all of your apprentices. And I think that's where we really, start to see the light and see the patterns and see, what we know and what we don't know. I mean, data doesn't lie. So as you start to bring these things together and you empower individuals, so excited. So big things in Alabama, big time for them, and excited for them to really lead the charge.
What's one big lesson you've learned from working on this project?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know if it's learned, but realized
Okay.
that the opportunity that folks are much more aligned than they think we are. And when I say folks, I mean lots of folks. You can, with 10 years roughly, we've been at this CBE game of really trying to figure out how we do this, right? From a standards, policies, procedures, community kind of thing. It's been about a decade. And I think, in the last couple of years in Alabama and bringing all of these stakeholder groups together, so employers, educators, workforce councils, all of the folks, they're much more aligned than they believe they are if you put them in a room together, if you just give them shared tools. And if they're not looking over each other's shoulder and they're not thinking that they're either agreeing or disagreeing with the counterparty, but if you just put the same vocabularies and shared tools in front of individuals in their day-to-day work, that they are much more aligned than they think they are. And to me, that is an amazingly powerful realization, because given the last 10 years and all of the committees and groups who've got together and said, I'm going to bring the educator and I'm going to bring the employers and we're going to get in a room and we're going to agree on a competency ontology, right? Tons of it going on. And they think they don't agree, but the truth is they do. They do. They are much more aligned than we ever would have thought. And so I'm incredibly excited and empowered by that, because I think that just says the opportunity is there and we're so ripe and ready for a solution that makes it actionable. But once you see the volume, like I said, the data don't lie, the patterns are there, right? And they're using the vocabularies in very similar ways.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the next phase, and like you said, the impact and the data from that work for sure. Super excited. Last question. This is a question I ask all my guests. I'm excited to hear what you're going to say. What is your vision for the future of career in tech education?
Oh, well, there's vision in what do I think is going to happen? There's vision on what I wish would happen. And so maybe there's two answers to that question. I think it's going to become much more prevalent. We're seeing high schools certainly provide different focus on that and ensure they're hitting those that don't have, a very clear academic track, that they have alternate. I can tell you as an employer and on behalf of employers that we need it so bad. We need you to come to the workforce with these fundamental technical skills. And we need to get them in the hands of adult learners. So I think we see it span all ages, and I think we see it become much more prevalent in middle and high school. And so, my dad always used to ask me, well, what are you going to do about it? And I'd say, well, why is that my job? And he's like, why isn't it your job? And so maybe I'm on a mission to make sure that we can capture that and create some artifacts or some evidence of that, make all that learning count. On a personal level, I'd hope that it starts to create more individualized opportunities, and that when you're coming through middle school and into high school and you're starting to figure out who you are, I hope we evolve to a place where you get to be a little less generic and a little more you, and focus on the things that you're really passionate about. Certainly in my life, I just do what I love and what gets me up in the morning, and you find success. You can be successful and make money at anything as long as, you are giving it your best. If you're committed to it and driven by it, you can be successful in it, whatever it is that thing is. And so I hope we get to a place where there's more equity in the individualism, and that there's more than one way to approach your learning in your young years as you prepare to enter the workforce.
Wow, such a powerful answer. I like that. Equity in the individualism. That's I like that. I like that. That was a good one. On that note, if someone who's listening wants to learn more about EBSCO Ed and the work you're leading in that space, where should we point them?
Oh, lots of good content on LinkedIn or on YouTube. Just look for EBSCO Ed. You'll find us. And lots of stories around the Alabama Talent Triad. Talentplaybook.org is where they post the playbook about their learnings and the work to date in Alabama. So some good stories to be read there.
Kristin, thank you for taking the time to share so many great gems. Really, this is like a conversation. I can't wait to look back on this episode like 3 years or 5 years from now to see the conversations we were having and like what's sticking now and what has turned into best practices around this, verified learning and the interoperability of our badges and credentials and all those things. So thank you again for sharing. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't be selfish. Share it with a friend or colleague who needs to learn more about this work. Until the next episode, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Global CTE podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to be the first to know about future episodes.